We're waiting. Get on with it.
Do something! Do something!
Hey folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple Top 10. This is the last Top 10 list I'll be doing. Whoa, calm down, alright, no, not the last ever, just the last one before I get the top 100 underway. So, today is my top 10 long games. Yes, I always have a bit of a reputation that I'm not the biggest fan of games that go on too long. And long is very subjective, more on that later, but the problem is that my game nights tend to last about 4 hours, tops. And I like to play a variety of games. I'm one of those, like, variety is the spice of life type people. You know, I love curry meals, I love sushi meals, I love tapas meals. Why do I like all three? Because you get to pick and mix from all sorts of different things. And it's just something I like with food, gaming, life in general. I'm just a variety type of person. So when it comes to games, I like to get more than just one done in a night if I can help it. And another thing I find with long games is that they tend to suffer from certain issues like, you know, excessive downtime, where you're just like, oh, hurry up and take your go, come on. You know, pseudo knockout, which I really hate, which is like, you know, you're half an hour into this 4-hour game and you've already like, oh, I made a couple of bad decisions. Well, that's me done. I better sit here for a bit, you know, and while everybody else gets to vie for the top place, I'm literally just there to go through the motions, and I hate that also. And sometimes there are just games where I just feel, why does it need to go that long? Here's a game that does it in 2 hours, you know, less than 2 hours. Why has this one got to go 5, 10? And there are some that do go longer than 10. I have seen it happen, Mega Civilization. But, you know, it's not that I hate all long games, because that's what this list is all about. This, my top 10 long games, which has been in my book for quite some time, actually, because I was meaning to do this a few months ago, but it, I got a bit sidetracked. So much so that you can't see it, but this has got a lot of scribbles all over it because I've had to rework this list about 3 times. You know, for the fact that it's been on my list for so long, I just never got round to doing it. Now, long is subjective. Now, I don't want people to start going on in the comments and that about, oh, it's not a long game, this is long, you know, it's not long unless it's at least 20 days long to play the game. It's like, no. Long for me is something that regularly would take me about 2.5 hours plus to play. And most of the time they'll tend to go on for 3 hours plus. So by the time you get the game off the shelf or out of your bag, you've got it, you set it up, you teach it to that 1 or 2 people that don't know it, you get it going and then you put it away, you're talking at least 3 hours or something. You know, that's my kind of time scale. And I know people can argue saying, well, I can play this in 90 minutes. You know, it's like, well, I can play this in 60. You know, I get that. Everybody is going to have a subjective view of what is long. That's just my criteria, okay? My list, do your own list. Put your own list in the comments and give your criteria and then we'll see how it goes. But, you know, that's just the way I think. You know, 2.5 hours, 3 hours plus, and I'm looking at, does it need to be this long? Does it need to be this long? However, like I say, I do have a selection of games on my shelf in my top 100 and on this list that I do like, despite being quite long. So let's get on with it. I think I've probably gone on too long, funny enough, in this intro. So, let's do it. It should be noted that if I start sweating, it's because we're still in the high 20 degrees mark here. I've got the windows shut to clear the sound out and it's hot, very hot. Yeah, I know, that's cold for some of you, but I don't take heat very well and we don't have air conditioning in the UK. So, at least not anywhere where I want it to be. So, my number 10 is kind of a squeaker on this list because I've only played it a couple of times and it's not enough to hit my top 100, even though I feel confident it would. This is probably something for next year after I get the Kickstarter and play it some more times, or if I just get my friends together who own the game. This is one from, Mind Clash games. They tend to do some very long games. They haven't got many games in their things, but their most reputable ones tend to be really long and involved. And this one is Tricarion. Dracarion is kind of like the Prestige, the board game. I don't actually own this game, so you just have to put up with the picture, but this one I've been wanting to play for ages. I've never got a chance, and my friends have had it, and it's like, come on, when do I get to play Dracarion? And mainly because there's another game from them that I really like, spoiler alert, but the Dracarion involves being like the Prestige. You are a group of rival magicians, and you're trying to get your, hone your tricks and perform them in the big theatre and get like fame and reputation, while also just trying to have the best tricks ever and build up your servants, your assistants and stuff like that. And it's a very involved, very long. I mean, this is a 3-hour plus game easily. Involved Euro game. But it involves a little bit of worker placement where you put your different assistants out and they've got different power levels and abilities. You put them on this map and you get things like, items for your tricks, you get new tricks, you can go to a side little dark alley that allows you to get all sorts of cards that do weird and wonderful things. You've got a soothsayer who gives a prophecy that changes some of the rules in the game every now and again, and you can tweak that to your heart's content. I think one of those is the module, but as I say, we used it and I loved it. In fact, I won my first game because I abused it. I literally was like the evil one out of the Prestige, just like, oh, I'll just send my little scallywag little assistant over there, who turned out to not only be a thief, he stole from the market a couple of times, but also, did other various aspects of crime. And at the very end of the game, I managed to scupper the other players by changing the prophecies round so that the one that was in the last turn reduced all your assistants to power level 1. And bearing in mind that the power level increases what you get from a particular action. So I already had the lead, and I basically crippled the entire last round. Loved it. But theme-wise, it's abstracted to a point. You have just got these, tricks and on this weird little grid maps of the various cards and that in the theatre. So it's abstracted to a point. But that whole feeling of we're rival magicians, we're at each other's throats, we respect each other for being magicians, but at the end of the day, I'm the best one, not you. You get into the theme, you roleplay the tricks. Like I was an escapologist, so my famous tricks at the end turned out to be various buried alive ones. So I kind of joked that I was basically going out and taking out all the people who disrespected my show and then using them in the trick. Dark. But it's you get into that theme. And that's why it squeaks onto this list, because I've only played it a couple of times. I want to play it more. I've got on the Kickstarter, that big deluxe set, can't wait. But that's not going to be till next year. So hopefully you'll see this on the top 100 next year, but not for this year because I haven't played it enough to warrant inclusion on that list. So Dracarion, number 10. My number 9 is probably the longest negotiation game. Yeah, I'd say longest negotiation game on this list. This is a solid 3 hours plus to play, and it can take longer depending on the group. But you are involved. 6 of you ideally are in this giant negotiation game trying to, keep this futuristic, almost cyberpunk style city from the Android Netrunner universe under control, and each of you is a rival corporation. You each have your own agenda about who you want to have more money of at the end of the day. One of you is actually a federalist, which means you actually want the whole city to tank, but you're playing a hidden traitor mechanic. But constantly you are making offers with these cards in order to say, you know what, I want to keep the riots down, so I want to do this offer. And then somebody counters with, yeah, we don't need to worry about that right now. Right now we got disease issues in this thing, so I want to cure these. And it's back and forth negotiation all around. You are engaged. That is New Angeles. And I'm going to have to chuck that little bag on the floor because it's getting in the way. Whoop, here we go. New Angeles. This was a hidden gem. I didn't think I would like it as much as I do, but this is one of those few games I want to play with max players as well. The full 6. You want every corporation and the federalist involved, and it's just, I love negotiation games, and this one is just like futuristic-y, negotiation. It's in the Android Netrunner universe, which I love. It's a perfect little cyberpunk universe. Not too difficult to play, but it does take a while. You are talking 3 hours plus. But the reason this one works on the list is because you are engaged the whole 3 hours. What downtime? There is no downtime. You are involved in every single negotiation, in every single round. Even if you haven't made the offers, you're still involved in the conversation. You're still trying to, manipulate people. You're trying to get an idea of what everybody's doing. Why are you so interested in that? What's your agenda? And are you acting a bit more federalist-like? You're constantly thinking. You're constantly involved. And when you can do that for 3 hours, where the game doesn't feel like it's taken 3 hours, then awesome, deserves it. Little caveat, it's not for everybody. You have to be quite vocal, you have to be involved. If you're one of these people that's shy and a bit, introverted, not comfortable with harsh negotiation games, you might find yourself being kind of put at the back at this one, and I don't recommend you try it. But for anybody else, New Angeles, solid negotiation game, and a long one. My number 8, I'm not going to get from that giant vault up there because that is heavy and it is staying right here. But you can have a look at the lid. This is the Seaport of Innsmouth etched onto the lid. It's a great box, heavy as all get out though, and it contains my Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror titles, all in their full glory. And this one is for Eldritch Horror, my number 8. Eldritch Horror is an adventure-style Cthulhu game. Arkham Horror was much more into the horror theme as you were going around Arkham and making all these encounters and trying to beat back the old one and their cultists and various monsters. Eldritch Horror is a similar thing, but it takes it more on a global scale, and it's more kind of Indiana Jones meets Cthulhu, because it doesn't feel as horrific, but it feels more like a big epic adventure. And that's why it gets a little bit of an edge over Arkham at the moment, plus it's also easier to get to the table. Granted, it is getting bloated like all get out. I mean, yeah, Fantasy Flight, you certainly kept true to your word on that one, didn't you? Remember when they said, we're going to let Eldritch Horror be a much more streamlined affair than Arkham Horror? Yeah, what happened with that? But it is still easier to get to the table. You can cherry pick your expansions better, and it can go on a long time. I refuse to play this with more than 4 players, and even then I prefer to play it with either 3 or just myself solo, controlling 3 investigators. And with that, you go through, you have all these nice thematic encounters, you get into the story, the immersion. Each time you use a different expansion or even a different old one, the game feels very different to play. It's just a solid horror adventure game, and it's lengthy. Does go on a while, and there's a fair amount of luck involved. You are rolling dice and triggering off various effects, but it's just the story is so rich that even if the dice fail you, you're telling the story. And you can have old one monsters that, one like trying to freeze the whole planet, one is trying to send you to a dream state, another one is this giant like worm from Tremors or something that's basically destroying entire cities. You can have the classic Cthulhu or Azeroth, is that it? I don't know, my lore is not perfect. And there's a lot of cool stuff to have in this game now. It is getting too bloated, and Fantasy Flight doesn't seem like they're stopping anytime soon, but, as long as it all fits in that box, which, that's not a difficult thing to do, it's going to happen. So number 8, my Eldritch Horror. My number 7 is trying to dodge an ice cream van that's constantly going by, trying to sound its jingle, and it is pretty hard. I wouldn't mind an ice cream, actually. Anyway, moving on. Number 7 is on the cusp of what you consider long. I don't often see this go lower than 2.5 hours. In fact, generally it does tend to take about 2.5 to 3 hours because you've got a lot to set up, you've got a fair amount to teach, and then if you've got a full player count, which we tend to have with this, it's quite involved. There's a lot of stuff to do, you've got so many options, analysis paralysis can happen, but even then it's just quite a lengthy Eurogame. But wow, is it a thematic Eurogame. I love this. This is Argent, The Consortium. This one is a worker placement game where your workers are different mages and they've got different abilities and powers, but you are in this university for magic, think Hogwarts for anime, and the idea is that the dean has mysteriously disappeared and you want to be the next dean. So you want to show off and say, well, I'm the best teacher here, I should get the job. Problem is, there's a consortium of voters who decide who the next dean is going to be. They each have their own criteria that they're looking at, but you don't know what that criteria is to begin the game with, and they're shuffled randomly, so some will be in the game, but some won't be. And the idea is that as you're going through the game and collecting mana and scrolls and items and potions and all this stuff, like in Hogwarts, you're also screwing over other players, zapping their mages off the table, closing off rooms, and as well as that, you're trying to find out what each of these, various consortium members want. You flip over one and it says, I want you to have all the supporters from the Divinity School of Magic. Okay, so I better start collecting those blue icon ones there and make sure I got those. Another one might just say they want someone with the most gold. All right, fine, but I better make sure I got a lot of funds there. And because everybody knows different consortium members, each one has it's kind of like a different path they're taking, but you have knowledge that someone else doesn't. So I know that I need a ton of mana, but I don't want to make it so obvious that I'm collecting mana, because then other people will figure out, oh, there's blatantly a teacher there who wants a ton of mana, you know, well, I don't need to find that one out, I better find a different one. So you've got to throw people off the scent a little bit. Now, it depends if they're getting loads of marks. I mean, by the end of the game, you tend to know at least 3/4 of those voters, although I have tried one game where I tried not to find out any. Didn't win it, but I came close. You know, I was spending more of my time doing other things rather than getting the marks, but it was a very risky strategy to sort of go in blind, not knowing what any of the voters want, just trying to collect a lot of everything. So this one, for some people, might take less than 2.5 hours to 3 hours, but personally, even with 3 players, it can take a while. You know, 3 players will take us 2.5 hours usually, and 4 players easily takes more. Bear in mind, there's a ton to set up here. I've got the expansions, there's even more to set up. And if you're teaching this game, you've got to teach a lot of options to people. All the mages, all the rooms, you've got to resolve all these rooms in order each round. It takes a fair bit of time. And like I say, this is on the cusp, I think, of the length thing, but, you know, can't knock it. This is one of the most thematic Euro games I have ever played. This is Level 99 doing their classic thing of let's give you a bucket of options and let you decide what you want to do, but injecting this cool kind of anime style universe into the mix, which I really like. This is a solid game. I don't think it gets enough buzz. It is quite complex. It's not the easiest one to learn or play, but if you can find a devout group of people who enjoy this like I do, then great fun. Argent, the Consortium. My number 6 is a huge box, except I can carry this one. This is also probably the longest 2-player game I have. Yeah, that's probably accurate actually. The longest 2-player game that I have, and easily takes about 3 hours plus to play, you know, particularly if you've got to teach it, which primarily you will have to teach this game. There's only 2 of you playing it. Unless you have some devout fan who's always playing this game with you. You've got to set it up and you got to teach it, on top of the lengthy playtime, which easily sends you past the 3-hour mark. But it is, Star Wars in a box. This one, oh god, can barely lift it. So, Star Wars Rebellion, as I said, Star Wars in a box. You want to play the original classic trilogy in one game, with tweaking the various plots how you see fit. You know, maybe Leia got frozen in carbonite this time, maybe the Death Star didn't blow up and it actually did blow up half the planets in the world, then this is the game for you. 2-player only, 1 player plays the Rebels, 1 plays the Imperials, and the idea is that the Rebels are trying to do hit and run tactics, you know, hide where the base is and get enough reputation for their resistance to grow stronger. It's kind of like a timer track for them. But the dark side, the Empire, is trying to locate the Rebel base. They're trying to say, which one of these planets on the map has he gone on? And they're completing missions to try and find out, and slowly but surely they'll find out where the base is, get there with all their force, possibly a Death Star if they built one, and, you know, go and blow it up. But it is there's so much Star Wars theme in this game, it's unreal. And the expansion Rise of the Empire, I think it was called, you know, it won the Dice Tower Award actually, deservedly so, managed to not only inject more theme into this with the Rogue One elements, it also didn't complicate the game any further. You know, the setup is still roughly the same, but what it did do was fix the combat system, and this was a flaw in the old one. The combat felt a little bit, a bit convoluted and a bit rushed. Now the expansion adds this deck of cards that each person has, tactic cards. They represent kind of cinematic moments in the films, and you just sort of play one and then you compare them, and you know, and that's how combat's resolved. It's a lot cleaner and it's a lot more thematic. It's like an auto include in the game now, you know, you don't need the old components. But it's lengthy, it's complex, there's a lot going on in this, but the fact that the asymmetrical nature of this is really strong, you know, one is trying to hide away, do hit and run tactics, and, you know, speed is of the essence, whereas the dark side is just like, I've got the overwhelming forces, but I've got to play this little deduction game trying to figure out, where are you? Where are you? Both sides feel very different. I enjoy playing both. I suppose I like playing the Rebels slightly more, because I like the idea that I'm slightly on the back foot, but also I like playing that bluffing game of, you don't know where I am, hee hee hee, and then suddenly they figure out where you are, it's like, oh, Christ, and boom, and then suddenly you're dead. Star Wars Rebellion, solid game, 2-player, wish I could get it to the table more often, because it's not easy to find somebody who wants to play a 2-player game for 3 hours, but when you can, so worth it. My number 5 is kind of, again, on that cusp. I think people are going to have a little bit of a problem with this one. So if you don't think this should be on the list, then just slide the list down and stick another honourable mention at number 10 or something. But, you know, this one can take a fair while. You've got a lot to set up, you've got a lot to teach. And if you've got, I mean, I tend to like playing this with 3 or 4 players max, but if you do happen to end up in a 5 or 6 player game, it's going to take you a while. And because the options get more and more exponential as the game progresses, there is going to be a lot more to do, particularly if you have got the players who haven't played it that much. You need quite a devoted group to play this in a quick time of less than 2.5 hours, unless you are playing a 2 to 3 player game of this. And even then you're still looking past 2 hours. You know, 2 hours at least with 3 of you who know how the game plays. But typically, I find this going past 2.5 hours quite regularly, and closer to 3 hours now that I think of it, you know, when it goes. But this is Sandbox. Yep, gotta get off the shelf. Sandbox, well, almost Sandbox style farming game. Caverna, the Cave Farmers. Now, not my personal pick of Uwe Rosenberg's games. It used to be, but then Fields of Arle got expanded, and now that is my personal pick of Uwe Rosenberg's games. However, Fields of Arle I find I can actually get done in 2 hours. Because you only have either solo or 2 or 3 of you now, and even then 3 players can only take about 2 hours, so that one didn't qualify for the list. This one I find takes longer than Fields of Arle for me to play, despite having to teach it. And a lot of that goes down to the fact that your options get exponentially greater. As you go through the rounds, you know, you flip over the cards and you end up with more actions, so more choices. You've grown your family, which means you've got more people to put out in the worker placement phase, and it does get more and more longer each round. And you've got to go through about, 14 rounds? It takes a fair while to get through this game. But it's great fun. People, it's the old age debate of Agricola versus Caverna. Which one is better? No contest. You know, I respect Agricola, but certain aspects of it, like the fact that the scoring is capped and you get so penalised for not having a balanced farm, so your farm just looks like everybody else's at the end of the day, you know, it kind of is a little bit of a put off for me. But I respect the game and still would enjoy playing it every now and again, just not enough to own it. This is the one I would own though. With Caverna, you're building your cave with internal rooms that everybody can pick from. You know, there's no randomness in it. It's like they're all there. You've got this wealth of choice. Which ones do you want? And then you've got the farm bit outside where you're doing the familiar grow your vegetables, grow your corn, raise your animals. But you can go adventuring and get more items that way. There's a lot you can do in this game. You know, fancy, you know what? This time I'm going to collect tons of sheep. Loads of points. This time I'm going to do mining. Points. This time I'm going to go adventuring loads and have a ton of coal and build weapons for every dwarf I got. Points. It's not that everything gets you a ton of points, but you can do whatever strategy you like in this game, and that is what I like in most Euros. I hate it when it pigeonholes you into a particular route that you must do. You know, I talked about the colonists on the last video I did. If you don't buy those storage sheds early, you lose. You just physically don't have the means to store anything. You ain't got to worry about that in this. And this whole debate of Agricola versus Caverna has gone on for many years, and personally, no contest. You know, Agricola I respect. It's a good game. I will play it every now and again, but I don't like the fact that your scoring is capped and that you must have a minimum of 1 of everything, otherwise you get penalised as all get out. Plus, you also need to have a large family, again, otherwise you just plain up lose. Here, doesn't matter. Do I need the largest family? No. Do I want to do sheep this time? Yes, I can do the sheep strategy. Do I want to do adventuring? Right, I'll do it this time. This time I'm just going to do mining. This time I'm just going to not even go outside. I'm literally going to just build up a cave and have 6 dwarfs living as an albino dwarf family in a cave. You know, I've done all these things and it, well, sometimes works. It doesn't always. But the fact that I can choose what I want to do is the highlight. I hate it when a Euro game pigeonholes you into this like kind of linear progression where you must do this, otherwise you lose. I've already mentioned things with Agricola, but you know, I mentioned the colonists on a recent video, and if you don't build those storage sheds early, you lose. You just do not have the means to store your stuff, so you must do this in the early stages. Here, I'll do what I like in the early stages. Am I planning to grow any veg? No, but then I don't have to go and cut out all my fields and go farming. I'll find my food by another way. So that sandboxy style feel I love in Euros, and this one, definitely one of my favourites. Not my favourite Uwe Rosenberg one, because Fields of Arle is even more of a sandbox than this game is. But you know, Fields of Isle, I can get done in less time. This one, certainly I think the lengthiest of my favourites of them. I did used to like Le Havre, I don't like it as much anymore. That was quite a long game as well, and if I liked it more, would have made this list. But for me, Caverna, probably my longest Uri Rosenberg game. God, my words are slurring because of the heat that I get to play. So Caverna, a wordy number 5. So my number 4, after a bit of a cool down of water there, is one from Vital Lacerda's range. Yes, I do like some lengthy complex Euros, and Vital Lacerda does put out some pretty good titles. The one in particular that I respect the most, and granted, you can see several of them on my shelf behind me, and there's one over there out of shot. You know, I did consider Kanban, but Kanban doesn't tend to always take me the 3 hours. Usually I can get it done in 2.5 hours, you know. I found a good way to teach it. It tends to move quite quick. You know, I don't have too much of a trouble with that one. So I was kind of umming and ahhing with Kanban. And Vinyos did not make the list. You know, it's an honourable mention. And nor did Lisburg, because that's the one I like the least out of his stuff. Well, not counting CO2, but, you know, that's the one I like the least out of them, but it's still a good game. Chosen one, though, is the Gallerist. This huge monstrosity behind me here, in this huge box, all about running an art gallery. This one has you sort of, with your gallery, you are collecting paintings at bottom prices, and then building up the fame of the artists in order to sell the paintings later for a profit, or just exhibit them in your gallery themselves. You're getting visitors, VIPs, and investors and that to your gallery in order to perform special actions. You're investing in the international market, and there's all sorts of other things you're doing. But it's probably the most streamlined of Vital Lacerda's games, I think. There's a lot you can do, and there's certainly a complex nature to this, but one thing that this game has in its favour to get on this list is because even though it does take about 3+ hours in order to play it, you never feel like there's that much downtime. And that's because of this great mechanic it's got for its influence. You have a track of influence that you build up over the course of the game, and with that influence you can not only get more money, but when it's someone else's turn, if they push your guy out of the space, it's semi-worker placement, but you've only got 4 places you can go to, and you can leave assistants behind to clog up the spaces. But if someone kicks you out of a space, you can spend a certain amount of influence, depending where you are on this track. You know, you try and deliberately position yourself in a place where it's cheap to do so, and you can then take a special action when they kicked you out. So you actually get to act independently of your turn on a fairly regular basis if you're keeping up with your influence. So for a 3-hour game that would normally be like, come on, hurry up your turn, I want it to get to mine. People actually resolve their turns pretty quick because it's a step-by-step, you know, progression of what you do, and there's only 4 places to put your workers, so there's only so much to pick from. But the fact that I can go, right, I've had my turn, I'm going to do this, build this artist up, great. I'll leave my assistant in that other spot. And okay, you've had your turn, great, and oh, you've kicked me out, oh sweet, I'm gonna now do this now, and then someone has their turn, and then you get to your turn, and I get to go again. And that's a small example. I've had times where I've left so many assistants on the board that somebody kicks me out, and I've just spent half my influence in order to do multiple actions on the same round. You can do a lot more in this game than in typical 3-hour Euro games, you know, mainly because you get to act outside of your turn. And this does raise the weight factor of this game up quite a bit because you need to be really on the ball. You can't sort of take a breather. You have to be like, oh, they've kicked me out. Oh, what was I going to do when they kicked me out? Oh, yeah, I was going to do that, wasn't I? And, you know, not one for the newbies, but definitely an easier one to learn than most of his. You know, I think the rulebook in here was particularly well laid out. It's just a bit more streamlined. It looks gorgeous, though. It's still a fantastic production, and it's certainly... I'm in an iron as to whether it's my favourite of Vital Lacerda's range. It's either this or Kanban. Kanban has a really great theme that I love, but this one is more streamlined and easier to get to the table, and still has a good theme. So, don't know. It's 6 of one, half dozen the other, but, you know, still a great game, and certainly a lengthy one that doesn't feel quite so long. My number 3, I will fetch for you in a minute, but it's going to require me to get out of my seat. This is my favourite game so far from Mind Clash Games. I already mentioned Tricarion. They are bringing out a new one soon called Cerebria, I think. I've already kickstarted it. I look forward to that one. Looks very cool, very thematic, quite complex, but we'll see. But so far, Minecraft games has kind of had a unbeaten track record with me. Now, granted, they haven't released many games, but they have released 2 games, Tricarion and this one, that I'm like, wow, this is how I want thematic Euro games to be. If you're going to make me a long Euro game, you make it thematic and you make it like this. They are so far on an unbeaten track record. And if Cerebria can do the same thing, then they're going to shoot up quite high in my preferential publishers. But this one is my pick of the lot because it's the first game to get time travel right. Finally. Get this. Oh, God. Yay! Oh, yeah, it's happening. Voila! Anachrony. This has got a full insert in here. It's got all sorts of wooden boxes and miniatures, and it's got the extra pledges and that. This is a full Kickstarter version, and which I bought after Kickstarter. Actually, I got quite lucky. But Anachrony. Anachrony is my pick from the whole Minecraft range because with this one, it's such a cool game. You a worker placement, but the idea is that you're in the future and you're a corporation trying to be rulers of the area in the future. But through time travel, you know that eventually this meteorite is going to hit the capital and it's going to cause chaos. But rather than sort of prepare everybody for this, you're like, you know what, this is going to happen at some point. We're going to be the ones to rise up when this happens. And so what you're doing is that you're preparing for this eventuality. You have a timeline for the rounds, and you know that the meteorite's going to hit in a certain round. You can actually play an expanded module to vary when that thing will hit. And it's a bit more complex, a bit more fiddly, but you can play it if you want to vary whether the event will happen or not. It's quite cool. But the idea is that you are collecting resources, you're sending workers out, not only into your buildings that you build, which all have different powers, but also in these cool little mechs, which, if you've got the Kickstarter version, you've got actual mech miniatures. If not, then you're using, I think, cardboard pieces. But you put them out onto this other map, which allows them to get, research super projects, to get resources, to build stuff. It's to hire more workers. You can have, a little posse of workers from administrators to engineers to scientists, and they do sorts of cool things for you. But this is the thing I love. Time travel. It's a hard theme to get into a game. Many have tried. Most, in fact, many, probably all have failed. This one succeeded. Because you have this idea that as you go through this timeline, they represent the different rounds, but you can borrow resources from the future. You say at the start of a particular round by closed bidding that I need to borrow some water or some resources or a spare mech from the future. You reveal it and you put the markers down. Doing so is screwing up with the timeline because it causes paradoxes. So the more you put out, the more you could potentially suffer. You suffer anomalies, and these count as negative point buildings that screw up your sort of map at the end of the game or during the game even. But the idea is that in the future, in a different route, because this timeline is mapped out so you can see where everything is, you get these buildings that allow you to time travel, you go back in time, and you pay back the resources you gained in the previous round. So it's like somebody just I could really use some spare neutronium. I kind of need it, really need it. And then suddenly a portal appears next to you and the flash comes out of it going, am I too soon? Here's some neutronium, here's some neutronium. And it's like, what the? Okay, fair enough, thanks, And you do this. But if you don't pay it back later, you cause these paradoxes. And it's just, my God, this is a theme I love. I don't know who came up with this idea, but honestly, genius. It's just the one sort of time travel mechanic I feel works the best in every game. And, you don't even have to do it. You might decide, I'm not going to screw around with the time travel paradoxes. I'm just going to leave it be. Granted, you just better make certain you do well at everything else. But you could do a little bit of time travel nonsense, just not as much as someone else. Or you could just be a complete time traveling idiot and paradox to your heart's content because you've got so many time machines that you can go back and constantly repay yourself. There's so much you can do, there's a wealth of options, different paths to victory. You go back in time to build super projects, so you're in round 2 and there's a super project. It's like, I'd really like to have that one by the end of the game, but I can't do it now. Fine, I'll wait 2 turns later, and now I'll go back in time and build it when someone thought of the idea. It's so great a theme. And then when the calamity does happen, you have some extra, objectives that you go for in order to get more points. and the board state changes so that each action can only be taken once for the rest of the game, and it's you don't know when the game's going to end. It will either end in 3 more turns, or when all the spaces get used up. When will it trigger? You don't know. I've gone on enough. This is a solid Euro game, one of my favourites. It's easily, I think, I forget where it is. It's got to be a top 30 in my top 100 somewhere, but it's so good. Complex, long, but definitely worth it. Anachrony. My number 2 I had to get from the other room, which at least meant I could go somewhere a bit cooler. But this one has, shot up in my ranking since I got it earlier this year. This is the successor to a game that I actually called overrated, and was a bit of a disappointment to me. The successor, though, however, has kind of overstepped its mark, and now, this is how I wanted the predecessor to be. It is full of miniatures. It is expensive, probably too expensive for what the game should be. But it's because it's blinged out with so much chrome and so much plastic that you just don't care. It just looks gorgeous on the table with a nice rolled out mat. I bought like the 2-box Kickstarter version, and it's this kind of Japanese fantasy style theme where you're dudes on the map, you're fighting each other, but you can hire monsters to your cause, you can, battle each other for area control, or you could just grab these cards that give you special abilities, and you don't even have to fight. You could just commit seppuku and get points that way, as long as you can get the resources to, man back up. This is Rising Sun, probably my favourite game that Cool Mini or Not has done. And it's, like I say, this is the successor to Blood Rage. And, Blood Rage was, okay, but I was a bit disappointed with the way the variety was kind of lacking in certain aspects, how certain strategies were much easier to do.
A shameful display!
And you can argue that this one may have 1 or 2 of those as well, but I haven't seen a particular strategy dominate every game I've played. It gets used more often, but I've seen counters, it's worked. But with Rising Sun, you're talking a good 3 hours plus here, to play this one. I mean, you can play it with 3 players, possibly in 2.5, but with a bit of negotiation that takes place, the choosing of the tiles, resolving all the battles and everything, it can take a fair while to play, and that's assuming you haven't set it up and taught it yourself as well, because to teach this game takes a fair little while to get people to understand it. And one thing I do notice is when people are picking those cards, the special power-up cards, the training part, they can be sat there looking there for a little while in order to decide which it is they want to pick. So the time does move on, and then you've got to set up all these miniatures, you've got to get them back in the box, there are inserts on the way for this from Kickstarter pledges and that, and it's like, I'm gonna need it, because trying to set it up is a bit of a beast. But it is a wonderful thematic style, area control, dudes on the map style game, which we've seen a lot of before, but just the way this looks when it's all set out, the slight bit of diplomacy between people, not a lot. I mean, it was kind of overhyped, I think, the diplomacy factor in this, but it's there. It's, it gets you talking with the other players, and I like the fact that I can decide based on what monsters I've picked up and what cards I've picked up what strategy I'm going for. Am I going to go full out warfare? Am I going to, be pacifist and just try and get points by slipping into combat and committing seppuku on a regular basis? Shall I get all the monsters I possibly can? Shall I get specific monsters? Shall I focus on the gods? There's different ways I can play it, but I always have a blast when I play this, providing I keep it to the player count of, I think I can go up to 6 now. It's a bit long with 6, but I will occasionally play this with 5. I am more playing this with 3 or 4 players. Still a lengthy affair though. At least it takes me a while. Might not take you, but like I say, disclaimer at the start of the video. So, Rising Sun, number 2. And my number 1, this one always takes long. Doesn't matter how many players you play it with. If you play this with multiplayer, it will take forever to play. If you play it by yourself, it still takes a long time to play. It still takes many hours. I have to sort of cut this game in half and return to it from time to time when I play it at home. And generally I do pretty much play this game solo for that reason, because I've got the TV there, I can put the, I can stream my Android tablet to, and then I can have the sound coming out of a little speaker, whilst I've got the tiles laid out. This is my favourite Or is it my favourite? No, technically there is one Cthulhu game I like slightly better than this, but this is definitely my favourite one that's like on the table with sprawling miniatures and that. And whoa, it is a great adventure style game, and it is the perfect way to implement an app into a board game. No other game has done it better. Not even XCOM. XCOM started this whole thing off, I think, or certainly was the best one to start it with. But this one has even managed to surpass the likes of XCOM, and that was a pretty good app. I'm going to have to reach down. I'm probably going to break my hand trying to get it out and lift it because it is heavy. God, why do I put my heavy boxes low down in the corner where I have to then bend down and pick them up? But Mansions of Madness 2.0 specifically, not the first one. Throw that in the garbage. It was broken, it had problems. Forget the original Mansions of Madness. You now have this one. Perfect app implementation. Great horror theme, ambient music. I wish it was voice acted all the way through, but the cost of doing that would have been pretty high, but it would have been so great. But here you have all these different scenarios. Each one plays very differently. You have your investigators, the different abilities and powers and that, and stat lines, and you set up the map as you go through. So as you go through a door, it tells you on the map to set up this tile and put these items and doors where they are and a monster here. And you play through a great horrific theme story from the Arkham Horror universe. But one thing that the app has going for it is the fact that in most games, particularly the ones that claim to be 4X, the exploring factor is kind of meh. You flip over a tile and there's like a couple of cubes there. Or you kind of know where everything is on the map. Here you don't. You could start off with a single tile and your investigators are there. You don't know what's on the other side of that room until you go through that door. And then you find out and the story expands. And even if you've played through the scenario already, you got a gist of the story and what the overall plot is, but the room layouts are slightly different. Where monsters appear from are slightly different. So it's not entirely still in your head. You'll think, I go through there and I'm going to be in the square room and there's a monster in that corner, it's going to get me. And then you go through it, it's like, now we're actually in the library, and there's a door there. Oh, is it that room? Oh, right, okay, when is it going to pop up then? Sorry, bit of a cough. And it's a wonderful thematic story. But it takes a long time. A long time. This is one that you need to set up for an event, set up, I've got a spare evening tonight, I'm going to play through a Mansions of Madness scenario. If anyone's getting this done in less than 60 minutes, then lies. I can't see how that's even physically possible to play, set up and take this down in 60 minutes. This is easily one that takes me over the 2.5, 3 hour mark. I'm having to, put it on the break because I'm sort of thinking about what I want to do on my turn. I'm controlling multiple investigators. I'm getting engrossed in the story, and it's quite a lengthy affair. But as lengthy affairs go, if they're going to be this thematic, this good to look at, and this just atmospheric, then that's the way I want it. So Mansions of Madness easily takes my #1 spot for my favourite long game ever. And I've got to make sure it doesn't crush any other games down there. So that's my top 10 long games. And I know there's a load of you out there that are saying, now come on, this was not long, here's long. And I know they exist. You go on Board Game Geek and you put in something like minimum 3 hours of length, you get all these weird and obscure games that could be all these war games, all these 18xx games, these like historical theme ones like De Macher, German political system one, I know is really long. And I know they're out there. They're just not the sort of games I go for. I'm not a big fan of war games. I don't want a game to take like 4 hours plus, like ridiculous levels of length and just be a dry Euro. I'm quite picky on that sort of thing. So I know they're out there. And some of you who have played those games relentlessly are going to think that long means 4 hours and anything less than 3 hours is short. Which, come on, let's be a little bit realistic here, okay? There is a bit of a tighter gap here between short, medium and long, if we're talking on a wide wage scale. But like I said, long is subjective and we could spend an eternity arguing about what is considered long. At the end of the day, is it long for you? That's the main deal. Do you think it's short for you? Do you think it's long for you? Then you can decide what games you think are long. This is long for me. This is like the 2.5 hour to 3 hour plus mark, and longer sometimes. It goes on beyond 3 hours for a lot of these games. And, it's including the fact that you've got to set up and teach it because that takes time. Some people are very quick to say, well, it takes like only 90 minutes to play. Yeah, did it take you half an hour to set up and teach this game though? Then it's a 2-hour game, not a 90-minute game. You have to factor that in. And again, we could argue to the end of time because some people don't consider setup and takedown and teaching to be part of the game's length. Lucky you, you found a group that knows every single game you have and all the rules to it. Frequently, I'm teaching the games, so that is something I have to factor in. But again, subjective. It's all down to you at the end of the day, what you prefer. And let's go for a few honourable mentions. There's no Patreon choice with this one. I don't know how often that's really going to be a thing, but occasionally if they do chime in, then I will certainly look it up. So, honourable mentions. Vinyos Deluxe. Yes, I've got that one behind there. I do enjoy this one. This is my third favourite Vital Lacerda game. But, you know, like I say, it just wasn't enough to meet my top 10. It's lower down in my top 100. But it's a solid winemaking game. Easily takes me beyond the 3-hour mark. Quite complex, but again, like the Gallerist, superb production. And a bit more complex. Not the most streamlined affair in the world, but it is a solid winemaking enterprise game. Another honourable mentions, and some of these honourable mentions are possibly because I consider the length not quite to be so long, but this one's definitely long. Forbidden Stars. It's still on my shelf over there. It doesn't get played as often as I would like though, which is really hurting it at the moment, but especially as the fact it's never going to get expanded. But Forbidden Stars, you know, the Warhammer 40k universe in space where you're controlling a different race and going out with ships, building them, a very engrossing and very involved combat system. Takes a long time. This is not a 90-minute game. This is one that is frequently very long to play. Can involve a bit of downtime as well, but it's a very thematic game, and if you like 40k universe, I say worth checking it out. You won't be able to buy a copy anymore, but you know, hopefully somebody you know has still got one, and I'm going to hang on to it still for a fair while. What else did I put as an honourable mention? I mentioned Le Havre earlier, but not as big of a fan of that game anymore for reasons. Go check my, which video did I? Go check my turkeys list, and I'll tell you why in that one. I did also consider Nations, because Nations can take me a fair while, but I seem to find I can get this done in about 2 hours, 2.5 tops, without too much trouble, and there's only so much I have to teach in the game. It's usually the really AP people that send this beyond the 3-hour mark, but it can happen. I think this is more like a maybe 11 to 13 game. I was tempted to put it on the list, but it's basically more of a, you know, just didn't quite make the top 10. I also considered Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game. You know, Sid Meier's Civilization is an excellent game, but 3+ hours you're playing that one. It's very complex, really hard to teach it, but it's a solid Civilization game. Probably would be my number 11, number 12 or something. You know, it's a solid game in its own right. And finally, Feast for Odin. Now, Feast for Odin, some people can say, oh, I can play it in a really short amount of time. Well, that's probably why it didn't go on the list, because I sort of thought to myself, how often does this ever go past 3 hours? And it's like, it does sometimes. You know, you get 4 players, teaching it, setting it up, it can take a very long time, but usually it tends to take about 2.5 tops, and I'm like, yeah, same reason Fields of Isle didn't go on the list. I didn't think it quite met the criteria for long. So, that's it. That's all my mentions. That's my top 10 long games. That's it for top 10s for a little while, because now, time to get on with the top 100. Although first, I'm going to go take a shower, because it's hot. Very hot. So hot. So I'll see you on the next top 100 list when it comes to these, and hopefully it'll have cooled down a bit by then. See you next time, guys. Take care, and remember, whatever you consider, how long is a piece of string? Doesn't matter, still only a game at the end of the day. Take care, see you soon.